In this video, I'll talk about incident eradication and recovery. The removal and restoration of affected IT systems and their data is what we're concerned with here. So, all steps that we take when we eradicate a problem and recover systems and data needs to be documented. This should also be planned ahead of time in a disaster recovery plan. There should be continuous improvement of security controls to ensure that they are effective in protecting IT systems and data. As we know, the threat landscape is always changing as related to IT systems. So, in response to that, we've got to continuously keep verifying that our security mechanisms are doing their jobs. Eradication techniques of things like infections include reconstruction or reimaging of systems, sanitization of storage media, and secure disposal of equipment, even when that equipment reaches end of life. Now, let's say, for example, that our network has been infected with ransomware. Now, ransomware infections often come in the form of some kind of phishing attack where users unwittingly open a file attachment from an email message or click on a link, and then the ransomware is unleashed. Now, the ransomware will seek to encrypt files that the infected system has write access to. And of course, if that's an administrative station, that could be a lot of write access, so a lot of data could be encrypted. And the malicious user will then, of course, require some kind of a ransom payment, usually in the form of Bitcoin, before a decryption key, if it's even provided at all, would be provided. Now, in the case of ransomware, one way to mitigate that is to restore systems. And for that to happen, technicians need to be aware of the incident response plan and their role in it, what they should do, and the sequence of steps they should take. So, reinstallation of systems could be manual, or you might use an imaging solution to reapply images. But when you restore a system, you've got to make sure you've got the latest patches. You should also, of course, immediately scan for malware. And you might even restore, or in some cases, reissue PKI certificates if PKI certificate authentication is being used. Now, still talking about the ransomware example, what about data? It's one thing to reimage systems and get them up and running, but what about data? Well, ideally, we want to always have an offline backup location elsewhere, and that might even be in the cloud. And we need to ensure that backups are clean. So if we've got a ransomware infection on an administrative station, and that administrative station also has write access to the backup location, for instance in the cloud, then that could also mean that our cloud backup is infected with ransomware and encrypted and we can't do anything about it. So we want to make sure our backups are clean, stored offline, and if we have to restore it, then we should certainly scan it for malware infections. And then, of course, when we have any type of issue, we always need to monitor our solution to ensure that the problem has been eradicated. So we always need to have offline backups of important data. Because in the case of ransomware, which is absolutely rampant these days, it won't be able to touch our offline backups. Now, in some cases, unfortunately, some people think that it might be more sensible to pay the ransom because it appears to be cheaper than paying the IT team to do an entire system and data recovery. Bear in mind, paying a ransom never guarantees, in this case, that you'll get a decryption key. With sanitization, we can overwrite media with multiple passes of random data. And there are specific tools that may have to be used depending on laws or regulations that apply to the organization. Degaussing is a technique whereby a strong magnetic field is applied to magnetic storage media, essentially to erase it. There's always the option of remotely wiping mobile devices that are lost and stolen to prevent sensitive apps or data from being used by unauthorized users. There's always the factory reset of equipment to remove the configuration. This is going to be important if our equipment has reached end of life and we might be donating it to charities or schools or selling it so it can be used by someone else. I've seen cases where a router, for instance, purchased from eBay still has the configuration for the network on which it was running in the past. Sanitization completion forms are normally required to be filled out properly and submitted after, before, or even during, in some cases, sanitization to ensure that we have a record, a paper trail essentially, of sanitization efforts. Secure disposal is also very important when it comes to things like the physical destruction of media. Maybe that's what's required, for example, for a military institution, whereby we might actually shred storage media physically, like hard disk platters or USB thumb drives, or maybe they're burned, or maybe holes are even drilled into disk platters, rendering them unusable. In this video, we discussed incident eradication and recovery.